Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Katia Perez, and I will be leading the session today. Welcome to the webinar Unwelcome Guests, Understanding and Tackling Invasive Plant Species, organized by Embrace the Earth. Today, we are celebrating International Day for Biological Diversity, and our colleague Celina Barroca is going to talk to us about a very important topic, invasive plants, since they are one of the threats facing biodiversity. So first of all, I would like to introduce my colleague. So Celina Barroca, she is a botanist and an environmental scientist working at the intersection of biodiversity, agroecology, and community-based environmental action. She managed conservation projects and field teams in remote biodiversity hotspots across the globe during field seasons. Her research focuses mainly on plants, from medicinal and aromatic plants to invasive alien plant species and nature-based solutions. Celina is committed to bridging scientific knowledge with local practices, raising awareness, and making science more accessible. Thank you very much, Celina, for being here today and speaking to us about such an important topic as invasive plant species. I leave the virtual room for your presentation. Thank you so much, Celina.
Well, thank you, Katia. Thank you so much for a lovely presentation. And hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. And as Katia mentioned, we were going to talk about invasive species. And the title I come up with was an unwelcome guest. So understanding and tackling invasive plant species. So I'm delighted to be here with you today. This is also, Katia mentioned, the International Day for Biodiversity. And it's definitely a day to reflect on the importance of protecting the diversity of life on Earth. So the focus of our session is going to be invasive alien plant species, or IAPS for short. So these species that have been usually introduced, intentionally or not, to new environments, and they can cause harm to local ecosystems, to native species, and even to our economy and health. So why are we talking about this today? Because invasive species are one of the top major causes of biodiversity loss worldwide, alongside other causes, and they are still one of the least recognized threats, often going unnoticed, and until the damage is actually done. So, while this is a global issue, it also have local consequences. Okay, it's like in urban park, forests, rivers, like in our doorstep. So it's really important whether we are here in Portugal, in Belgium, in anywhere else, addressing this issue is essential to preserving native flora and ecosystem balance. So also this webinar, I want to focus that it's about raising awareness, okay, sharing some knowledge and helping each other understand our role as whether are we citizens, professionals, scientists, or natural enthusiasts, It's important on preventing and managing plant invasion. So first things first, okay, let's deconstruct some concepts and better understand them. Ooh, so the next. So let's begin with the basics. So what are invasive alien species? So these are pretty much non-native, meaning exotic, that they are coming from outside a particular ecosystem. So I would like to show some examples of exotic species. For example, in Portugal, I chose this one, the Ceratonia siliqua. It's a carob tree. So it's originated from the Mediterranean area, but the eastern one, like Cyprus, and it was introduced in Portugal a while ago, centuries ago, but it's actually now naturalized and is widely cultivated, especially in the southern part of Portugal, the Algarve region. So it's not invasive, as integrates well with the local ecosystem and does not aggressively spread. So this carob tree produces, for example, the pods that are used in food as a chocolate substitute, for example, or used as flour. Okay, it's a species drought resistant. So in Portugal, we lack a lot of water, especially during summer season, and is also suited to sustainable agriculture practices. Has also ecological value in preventing soil erosion and supporting the biodiversity around it. So it serves pretty much like as an example of beneficial and non-invasive or exotic species. For example, in Belgium, we do have, I chose this one. It's a bit controversial one. It's Robinia pseudoacacia, called black locust in English. Um, Here in Portugal is already an invasive, okay, but however, it's native to the southern eastern part of United States. It was originally introduced in Belgium for ornamental and forestry purposes, and is highly valued as exotic species for ecological restoration, beekeeping, and wood production. So it's not yet invasive, but it's under current Belgium conditions and is monitored, okay, due to its potential. For example, in Portuguese already, okay. But this is quite a prime example of a exotic species with national importance and a need to careful stewardship. So what makes an exotic species invasive? So it needs to come, it's a combination of several factors. So it needs to come from outside the natural distribution area, as we say, from outside of their native area. It needs to be introduced different ways, okay, for different purposes. And it needs definitely to cause negative impacts on ecosystems or human activities. So that's when an exotic species become an invasive species. Alien just means pretty much coming from somewhere, not the original one. So let me show you some examples of invasive alien species in Europe. I mean, I'm showing here some other taxa, not just plants, because then we're going to focus more on plants too. Okay, so I chose these four examples, some more known than others. But for example, on the left, we have on the left, well, right side or left side for me, it's the koipu, also called nutria. So this is top example of an introduction that gone wrong in Europe. So it was an exotic species brought for economic purposes for the fur industry in the 19th and the 20th century, and now it's costing millions in environmental damage, infrastructure repair, and actually ongoing eradication efforts, especially I think in France, Italy, Germany, and definitely in Belgium. So this is a good example of introduction that gone wrong. Then the gray squirrel, it's a good example, for example, in UK is also a major invasive mammal in Europe, not just in the UK, but their pathway of introduction was pretty much escaping, from captivity. And they are replacing the native European red squirrel. So this gray is replacing the native one. And they pretty much compete through resources, and they can be hosts and carrying diseases. So it's quite fatal to, they kill pretty much the red squirrel. So in the UK, I know that this species impact a lot of commercial forestry because they strip the bark of the trees that can cause like to reduce the timber yield and influence the woodland like management practices. So it is it is really hard then to for producers and everybody that manage like forests and woodland types. Another example is a red swamp crayfish. So in Europe, the main pathway of introduction was through aquaculture. So it can transmit a lot of diseases, which are lethal for the European native like crayfish and other types of amphibians. Due to its like omnivorous feeding habits, it reduces the population of local amphibians, macroinvertebrates, and aquatic plants too. And they also burrow, like digging burrows to get in. So it decreases the water turbidity and it facilitates also the collapse of like banks, usually on river banks. So another thing is that it is edible, but they accumulate a lot of toxins and heavy metals in its tissues. So it can harming not just other predators, but also humans when consuming it. Um, the last example, last but not least, I think is a more common or known one, is the Asian hornet, the Vespa velutina. So this one was introduced in Europe unintentional, so accidentally, by human-assisted transport. And it was the founding hornet queens as were introduced as a stowaway. Stowaway means like they were introduced to a new location without anyone realizing it. And this was caused a major like biosecurity issue because they arrived in France with traded goods transported from China. So no one realized it until they were here and staying. So these Haitian hornets, the workers sometimes of their community, they prey on many insects like honeybees and other wild pollinators that we know for sure they are really important for our biodiversity. So now that we understand what invasive alien species are, let's turn our attention specifically to the plant species, invasive alien plant species. So not all exotic plants are invasive, but all invasive need to be exotic, need to be from the outside. So a plant that is considered invasive when it shows certain characteristics that allow it to spread and to dominate ecosystems. So, what characterizes pretty much an invasive plant? We know that they need to come from somewhere elsewhere. They need to reproduce autonomously, meaning on their own. It spreads beyond the areas, so they spread away from the parent plant that they were initially introduced, both spatially and over time. And and also it depends on, regardless the environmental disturbance level. So it could be in a very well native forest, and it can be like a very disturbed area. It reaches high densities usually in the invaded areas, and crucially it causes environmental changes and negative socioeconomic context impact, sorry. So how do they get here? I mentioned like different ways, but the main ones is naturally as ecosystems shift or climate change, accidentally through trade, tourism, or transport. For example, seeds sticking to clothes or boots or vehicles. So it's why it's important to tackle these things, and also intentionally. So intentionally, like for example, ornamental use in gardens or for agriculture or forestry, and then they later escape into the wild, and we don't have any hand on it anymore. And what problems can they cause? What problems do these species cause? So, mainly environmental and socioeconomic impacts. So, invasive alien plant species can outcompete with native flora for sunlight, for water, nutrients, and so reducing biodiversity. Also, they can carry pests or pathogens that infect native species, though transmission of diseases. They can also hybridize with native species, so they can like crossbreed with native plants, and that leads to genetic changes and loss of native species. And also, they degraded the habitat of soil and water conditions, for example, because they might alter like the pH, the nutrient cycles, or even the water availability, damaging those ecosystems. Regarding socioeconomic impacts, so there's a lot of losses in agriculture or forestry production, and they can invade, for example, field crops or forests, and they reduce the yield and increasing management costs. So also they cause a lot of damage to infrastructure because their roots can grow and can break pavements, for example, block waterways and damage the full buildings sometimes. And also transmission of diseases to animals and to humans. So to animals, like diseases to livestock and even domestic animals, because they can carry pathogens harmful to those ones. And also to humans, because they can harbor like allergens or vectors, like insects, like the mosquitoes that spread diseases to people and cause a lot. And there's a lot of known ones like severe allergies. And this is a type
Okay.
of it. Sorry? Okay. Carry on. So, invisible alien species, I mentioned right in the beginning, that are one of the five main major causes or the main direct drivers of global biodiversity loss. They can also cause significant adverse economic impacts, as we mentioned already too. And just an example here, this economic impact in the EU has been estimated around 12 billion euros per year. So it's quite a lot. Also, these species exacerbate like poverty and threaten development due to their impacts on agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and natural systems, pretty much, which form like an essential livelihood base for populations in developing countries. So the rate of new introductions is increasing as like global movement of people. We travel so much more now, and people and goods also. We buy and send a lot of goods, and that raises the chances of species being transported to new environments. So at the same time, climate change is making areas more favorable to new species. So the third point here that I mentioned, the IPBES, it's the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. So it's pretty much like a consortium of like, I think 140 countries around the world, is a global one. And they come up in 2023 with this global assessment. It's actually called ACA, as known as like the Invasive Alien Species Report, because it's the official thing. And they reported 37,000 alien species to have been introduced worldwide so far. And from that, 3,500 of them are harmful. So it's a big number. And carry on. So the economic cost alone of all this, just not just the controlling, just the impact, because control methods and everything, it's another number. It's just adding to this pile. So the economic cost alone was estimated at over $423 billion per year just in 2019. So, and those costs is actually having 4 times more. They quadrupled every decade since 1917. So it's something that I think and hopefully makes everybody think and reflecting a bit on it. So again, the severe global threat posed by invasive alien species remains underestimated and sometimes, overlooked. So given the magnitude of the threat and the rising economic and ecological costs, it's no surprise that both European and national authorities, like in Portugal and Belgium, they have developed a specific legislation to prevent it, and also to control it and manage those species. So let's take a look at the legal and framework. So in 1999 was the first time that actually in Portugal, Portuguese legislation acknowledged the seriousness of this issue by running a decree law, creating a decree law. And it was the first time that they kind of comprehensively regulated the introduction of exotic species into the wild. Okay, and there it was around 30 plant species that were invasive. In 20 years after, in 2019, this decree was replaced by the decree here in the slide, and listed 300 species, more than 200 of which are exotic plants with invasive status in Portugal. So exotic that became invasive along the time. So this law prohibits the possession, cultivation, breeding, trade, and introduction of these species into the wild. So again, so it can be considered, sometimes ecologically risky, but these new species introduction are subject to authorization. There are some exceptions, but it needs to be reviewed by the main entities. I give 3 examples just to show you. On the next slide, I chose the water hyacinth, the ice plant, that is another name, common name too, and the silver wattle, because are I think the more serious or the ones that are causing more known impacts here in Portugal. So the water hyacinth is the Acornia crassipes. So it's an aquatic plant that forms dense cover on the surface of freshwater bodies, and its populations can double in like 12 days. So it's monstrous. And they can block waterways, they can limiting boat traffic, and they're affecting also fishing and trade. I know that in some places it reached such densities that the boats and the ships are even unable to leave the docks. They cannot leave. The other plant, it's also the ice plant. I also found that it's called commonly Hottentot fig. So it's a Carpobrotus edulis. So it's very common here on the coast, and Portugal is half of it is coast. So it forms like impenetrable mats, like dense covers on extensive areas, and they they cut like all the type of development of native vegetation. Also, it promotes soil acidification, so it's a process that favors not just its own growth, it makes nothing else growing in it. So it's a big issue. And also the high costs in applying control methodologies on this species is very high because also the biomass, it creates a lot of biomass that then is really hard to dispose. Last but not least, and this is a soft spot for it because I worked a lot with this species, is the Acacia de albata. It's called in Portugal mimosa, and it's a silver wattle. So this one is pretty much, I would say, is considered as one of the worst invasive species of terrestrial ecosystems in mainland Portugal. So he has like a allelopathic effect, so that means nothing else grows around or underneath it, and he actually inhibits like the development of native species, not just other species, but also native species. So now drifting to Belgium. So in Belgium, like the regulation of invasive alien species is a little bit from Portugal, different, but it's framed by both federal and regional levels. So while the federal government is responsible for issues like trade and customs, like the regions Flanders, Wallonia, and the Brussels capital region, they manage nature conservation and environmental policies. So since 2014, Belgium has implemented the EU regulation and on invasive alien species and established a list of like species of union concern. I do have also that reference at the end if anyone is interested in it. So it's a really good compiled work that list for union concern. So in addition, regional actions plans and blacklists exist to address like locally problematic species. So not just following the regulation, the European regulation, but there's a lot of like local different types of action plans. For example, the Flemish region, I know that enforces like strict control strategy for the Japanese knotweed, the Fallopian japonica. I don't know if you heard about it before. It's a quite severe one across Europe, pretty much. And in Wallonia, for example, the Canada goldenrod and American skunk cabbage are monitored and removed from like natural areas through different types of events and programs. So those are the ones I just mentioned. So the Japanese knotweed is actually originated from Asia and is pretty much able to monopolize like space and to form dense and persistent like populations. Again, outcompetes native vegetation, and so this one cannot regenerate anyway, and also can cause a lot of organic contamination in the soils when they decompose its leaves because it's a bad composition of its leaves when they've been cut or they died. Another one, the middle one, it's the Canada goldenrod, so Solidago canadensis, and is originated from North America. Canada, I bet. And it forms like also extensive like clones with a high shoots density that spread rapidly. They have a type of vegetative lateral growth, so they can also cover large areas. So it can eliminate almost all other plants around. They have also allelopathic properties, and the competitive ability is actually favored through those interactions, the allelopathic interactions. So once established, this one it remains dominant for a long period of time, and again, it prevents like the natural colonization of native species, and especially the woody species. Regarding the last one, the American skunk badge, as you might bet, it's also from America, but it's North America too. It was first seen in Belgium in 2006, and were thought to be introduction through horticultural trade, like ornamental purposes, because it's quite beautiful, vivid one, nice yellow colors. So this species has also been introduced unintentionally, thought to be escaped into the wild from abandoned nurseries or from planted areas, via streams, through water. Yes, and also birds and some mammals, small mammals, they can eat the seeds by ingesting the berries and then defecate and then spread the seeds like that. Also, human-assisted spreads, I think, is also possible through like potentially and in unintentional, accidentally disposal of contaminated garden waste. So we need to prune things, we need to dispose away some garden waste, and sometimes we don't do it in the right or the better way we know. So this one was establishing like in swamp forests and associated wetlands. And after some years, like they have this, when they grow big, they have these huge leaves that create like a dense layer, and they take out all the light from the native species that are not, adapted. These ones, the native ones, adapted to like shade or even like darkness, so they end up to die. And I know that also there's a type of orchid that has been like with the status of conservation because of this plant, because it's overtaking that native orchid in Belgium. So regarding some impacts, I kind of separate these species and I chose them through their also different type of impact. So urban impact is this one, the Japanese knotweed in Belgium is causing significant structural damage in urban areas. So it's invasive, like root system, can penetrate through cracks in concrete, asphalt, bricks, and leading to like damaging building, like not just foundations, but walls, drainage systems. So it's quite a big issue. And I know that in municipalities like Edegem, I think I'm correctly pronouncing it, and Antwerp, they implemented control measures, different types of ones, like including the use of electrocution to eradicate the plant, like we can see here, Brussels Times notified that. And as we can see also in the map, it's spread all over Belgium. So it's also it's a species that has been in Belgium for a long time. And as I said before, all across Europe. Another type of impact is the agricultural one, where Solidago canensis, the Canada goldenrod, poses a threat to these type of agriculture areas by invading like abandoned or disturbed lands, and they reduce again native plant species number, richness, and also they change the soil properties. So some studies have shown that its invasion definitely can lead to decreased biodiversity and soil degradation together, which as you think, like if soil is degraded, so on agricultural land, it will definitely affect crop productivity. So the last one regarding riparian impacts, meaning like water bodies and rivers, impact on rivers. So this one is spreading like along like the river banks and the wetlands in areas in Belgium. So they also form these dense like stands and they outcompete native vegetation again. So they have these large leaves that I said before, creating the shading effect. And they also decline, not just the local flora, but they change all the natural habitat. This is, as shown in the map, it's been more in certain areas. It starts slowly. It spread a little bit. It's not all over Belgium like the two ones before, but it's starting to kind of create a bigger problem. And they recently been introduced to the list of union concern I just mentioned under the EU regulations. So pretty much what can we do? We need to think about the steps towards, more successful management of invasive species. So managing these species is usually and often long and expensive process. So delays only make things worse, and also they make worse not just ecologically but also economically, as we've seen the numbers. So that's why prevention, early detection, and rapid response are key. So the goal is to stop pretty much new species from establishing in the first place. To act effectively, we can follow a structured like management cycle, like the one shown here. And it starts with prevention, early detection, and rapid response. So these ones are the most cost-effective strategies to manage invasive plant species. So pretty much by minimizing the pathways of introduction and spreading, we can reduce the future ecological and economic damage by the biological invasions. So early detection through, for example, monitoring and community awareness allows for a rapid response, increasing the chances of successfully eradicate, for example, before the species become actually established. So some examples of early detection, prevention and early detection. So we can do it through regulating the trade and transport of plants, for example, banning or restricting the non-invasive species from being sold in nurseries or online, for example. Sorry. For example, I've seen in nurseries and some plant shops that some consider already and with the status of invasive species being sold. So it is really important for us to double check things and make sure that we're not buying and contributing to this issue. Another point, important one, is to clean the cleaning equipment and vehicles. So this spreads preventing the spread of seeds and, for example, plant fragments by cleaning our boots when you go out for even a walk like and bringing it at home. Machinery that we're using around, or even the boats, for example, when they come out from the rivers, making sure they are disinfected, because they can be moving between sites and then spreading what we don't want to. Also, promoting public education and awareness campaigns is really important by informing the gardeners, tourists, even our landowners about the risks of introducing exotic species because they can become invasive at some point. The use of native or non-invasive alternatives in landscaping by using those plants. For example, promoting the local flora. So we do have pretty much everywhere like native species that you can focus on those ones. Maybe they are not the best flowers or the most stunning colors, but it is really important, to promoting local flora, especially in urban planting schemes around. In rural, it's where you found most of them, so it's not a big issue. Also, it's important to enforce border and quarantine controls. So it's important to have those inspections to prevent the import of invasive species through like airports, the ports, and cargo controls. For example, Antwerp has a massive port, and I've known that many things have come through there along the years. What else can we do as early detection and rapid response? We can do some, citizen science. It's really important to reporting some issues through different platforms and apps. So and that helps to detect like new sightings early. I will have at the end also like all these apps and links so I can share with you then and explain how it works. Also, regular monitoring of sensitive habitats is really important. For example, schedule surveys in conservation areas or at-risk ecosystems to have an idea where it stands to. Also, rapid action teams like local authorities or volunteers trained to like remove small populations as soon as they are found is really important as a rapid response. Also, creating alert lists and maps. For example, keeping update records of where invasive species are likely to appear next and based on risk modeling. That's being used more often now, like modeling softwares like R or Python, for example. And also training local stakeholders. So providing identification workshops for farmers, forest workers, like municipal staff, in order to recognize and report species early. So this scheme then, the management cycle, it moves through the six next steps. So I'm just gonna mention them: setting clear objectives for the invaded area, prioritizing areas and species based on threat levels, evaluating control methods, implementing a tail intervention plan, monitoring the outcomes, and finally reviewing and updating the plan whenever it's needed and relevant over time. So I won't talk in detail of each of them. However, I would like to highlight the different control methods on the next slide because this is adaptive step-by-step approach. This helps actually ensure that the resources are used wisely, actions are grounded in both local context and scientific knowledge. And there are resources and protocols to follow, but this also is usually follow at organizational levels, for example, entities, municipalities, and scientific or academia, I would say. So just regarding the step three that I mentioned to the control methods, so to have a better, scenario, what can be done. So different invasive species required, they need different control strategies. So the choice of method depends on the type of species, the scale of the invasion, the characteristics of the sites, the available resources, and also the long-term goals. So pretty much we do have manual and mechanical control by cutting, uprooting, hand pulling, mowing, debarking, for example. That works really well with the acacias, the mimosa one. Well, these ones, it's for small infestations, okay? But they need repetition. Then we have chemical control for example, the application of herbicide through different methods too. However, should be used carefully and selectively considering environmental impact. So this is not the I would say the ideal one, but it's still a control, okay? Control method. Another one that I like more is the biological control. So it's pretty much using natural enemies like insects or fungi. And this is a long-term method with like very strict regulation in the EU. So we really need to pay attention because if we have something coming from somewhere else that is not ours, is exotic, becomes invasive, we don't want to introduce other things, to control it because, we never know what can happen. But this actually, it's a very effective way and is there is an example in Portugal that is can show that it works real well because when you introduce something else, even is regulated by the EU strictly, it's something that needs a lot of research, a lot of studies. So I would say there's an example of a biological control working successfully in Portugal that was brought from the outside too, but it's pretty much it's working, and it took like more than 7 years, I guess, to actually to introduce this that natural enemy. I would say for that plant also it has a specificity so high that it just goes to that species. So this is something can be controversial, as I started to mention, but I do think it's a really good control method. Another one is the prescribed fire. So this also can be controversial because it's only specific ecosystems and under very strict conditions, and not everybody can do it. It needs to be very professional people to do it. Another thing that brings me back to the old times, it's a grazing. So by goats and not other animals. So it's useful in maintaining like open habitats, but also it must be controlled. And the last one is pretty much the combined integrated control that using several methods, not all of them, the previous ones, but using different ones strategically and often the most effective approach over time, for sure. So I was talking about this, and it works pretty much like in organizational level. So at the community level, okay, everyone can play a part. So citizen science and like local engagement are powerful tools in the fight against, the invasive plants. For example, residents, schools, volunteers, everybody can help by learning to identify and reporting invasive species and reporting like sightings through the apps and local platforms. I will provide then and explain. Participating like in local monitoring efforts or control actions, for example, community cleanups, habitat restoration days, and volunteer with it. Also, raising awareness in their own networks, for example, in their schools, in their kids' schools, in their neighbors, social media. Also, choosing native plants for gardens. So try to avoid, to use of the to use other plants or spread the invasive ornamentals. So if you know already that it can be an invasive one, it's exotic, but it can be an invasive one, don't buy it, of course, and don't use for your gardens. But if you know that it's an exotic, but you don't know if it's an invasive, please go and double check before you purchase it. And also supporting local initiatives. So you can also advocate for like responsible like land management, or there's a lot of local initiatives like just check your local municipality agendas. For example, they always have different types of events and activities that you can be part of. So by getting involved, we create like this shared sense of responsibility, and this highly increase like our ability to detect and respond to invasions early. And it's when, as I mentioned, the action is most effective. I was starting to talk about this. So responsible gardening, it's been a cause that is not, it's been kind of underrated a little bit because people can purchase, and when you purchase something, you think, oh, this is legal. We would think, but not always, because there's no actually official entities that go and certify, oh, there's a legislation that makes like the nurseries to not being able to buy certain species. Because again, within even Europe, just Europe, you can go in Portugal, one species invasive, but then in Belgium it's not. So it can be commercialized. So it's quite bit sensitive point. So I would just, ask, and as a simple, but powerful way to prevent the spread of invasive plants, it's what we plant in our gardens, in our farms, and then also in public spaces, can have lasting impacts on like surrounding ecosystems. So here's what we can do. We can choose native or non-invasive species, like we can choose exotic but non-invasive, adapted to the local environment already, and also avoiding planting, non-invasive ornamentals, as I mentioned, uh, even they are widely available in nurseries and shops. Also, check plant labels and source this carefully. Usually, the plant, when you buy it commercially, they have a plant passport, so they have a lot of information in there. Again, even they can be sold in different names. Yes, because common names, even scientific sometimes is different because taxonomy changes and the names changes over time, but also the common names are the most tricky ones because the same plant can be sold under different names. So this can be quite tricky. So if you are aware of it, it will be great. Also, the disposal of garden waste, it should be done properly to avoid accidental spread of wild areas. In many areas already, there are like proper bins where you can actually dispose that. Don't mix with like your common bin in the house. And share knowledge. Encourage like friends, neighbors, local gardeners, everyone that has a green thumb and likes to garden, to make informed planting choices. And by making those decisions, these thoughtful decisions in our own spaces, we can prevent like new invasions and protect like native biodiversity also. And this is just starting right at our doorstep. So, in the past, I would like to talk about this project that I participated in that is called Acacia for Fire Prev. It was like a national initiative in Portugal addressing the ecological and fire risks posed by these invasive species that I mentioned before, the mimosa one, Acacia de albata. So, as it's been in the news, so pretty much is common knowledge that Portugal has a lot of wildfires, and this plant species in specifically has a lot, it's a cold pyrophytic, so it means like it thrives after fires, wildfires. So it's a tricky one. So in this project, we pretty much adopted a multidisciplinary approach that was great, and it's a brilliant way to work and to get great results. So from field ecology to chemical analysis, even to stakeholder engagement and public awareness, we developed different type of kind of little programs. So we studied like the nutritional and mineral profiles of acacia flowers and pods. Also tested potential like valorization strategies using some chemical extracts from those. And beyond research, we also carry out like educational campaigns, like in local and school communities. We run like BioBlit events, like the one also shown in the picture, and these ones to promote and like raise awareness about the impacts of invasive species. So this project pretty much foster collaboration across, local authorities, scientists, general public, in order to find like sustainable solutions for invasive species management, especially in fire-prone landscapes, as it is the Mediterranean one, like in Portugal. So as I mentioned before, there are pretty straightforward apps and platforms, for identification and reporting invasive species. So we do have this one in Portugal, the invasores.pt. It's a brilliant one. And this website has loads of information. You can find pretty much everything I said now, almost everything in there. And this allows like users, in Portugal to identify, report sightings, and actually learn about local invasive plant species. It's connected through the Centro Functional Ecology Center in Coimbra and some national monitoring efforts. Uh, the next one, the iNaturalist, is a global one. I've seen a lot of people using already. That's good. So it's pretty much a global biodiversity platform within the Biodiversity for All program. So where users, they can just photographs, take a picture, and log the plant, animal, fungi, whatever sightings that you find. It's pretty much straightforward. And these invasive species are flagged by the community, the scientific community, and the naturalist community, or linked to expert reviewed projects. So even you don't know the name, you upload a picture and someone will look at it. At least they know where you've seen it. The other one is the European Alien Species Information Network, is a more kind of European, Europe-wide. So it's maintained by the European Commission, the JRC, the Joint Research Center, and includes like tools for reporting, mapping, and also species alerts. And the other one through observation.org, the OPS Identify, it's also a European one. and identify species from like photos also, and lets like users contribute to biodiversity data, including invasive species record, just the same as iNaturalist can do. There's another one, the GBIF, there's many others, but I do have a handout at the end. If you like, I'm more than happy to share it. We can just like check at the end whoever is interested in it. Still in here, so some municipalities and environmental NGOs, they might also like run their own platforms and seasonal campaigns. So again, around you, just double check, local agendas, and you might find it. So just wrapping that up, because I'm talking for a while. Invasive alien species is definitely a growing problem. So the rate of introduction, as we mentioned, the 37,000 species, is increasing. So I don't know, for many reasons, due to the rising global trade, the mobility, climate change definitely makes new areas for more suitable for exotic species to thrive and become invasive. And that's why understanding those and the invasive alien species is not just a matter for scientists and policymakers. I think it's a shared responsibility and across all communities, all sectors, and pretty much all countries. And I think that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, to listen. And please just make any questions you have now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Selena. I think this is a very complete webinar that also was an excellent opportunity to delve deeper into the ecological and economic impact of invasive plants. Well, I cannot believe such a huge amount of money that is
It's crazy.
spent in on this topic. Yeah. So well, I would like I would like to know if anyone has a question or a comment for Selena.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think I am seeing the chat is already full. Thank you so much. Um, I would like to ask to Valerie if you would like to well, I was reading also
The chef.
the status of the invasive species in Africa.
Oh, okay.
By the way, it's a very worrying reality.
Yeah, she's saying that invasive species reports we have, yeah, in over 70% of African countries. So I do know that is a main thing. So for example, I know one of the examples I mentioned when the ships cannot leave the docks because of the water hyacinth, it happens on South Africa. So
Mm.
like around Cape Town and some ports there were some parts that the ships couldn't leave. And there's another around a lake there. I don't remember the name now, but it's in definitely in South Africa. So I bet, yeah, that's an issue that is worldwide, is global. So it's why it's so important for people to, to have at least a knowledge, well, the sense of this is an issue because it can go like loss of biodiversity. We don't see it every day directly. It's quite, muted, but there's a lot of catastrophic things happening after that. So, yes. So, thank you, Valerie, to sharing that.
Yeah, thank you, Valerie. Deborah, she said, excellent presentation. Is
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you very much. Also, Krishna, unique topic, very informative, very well researched. Yes, I have a question, Selena, that
Yes.
I'm a little bit curious.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you, what is the control or what is the strategies that have been shown to be most effective in the long term without harming native species?
Oh, you mean which type of control? So,
Yeah.
uh, I would say between all of them, maybe the one in the beginning, like hand pulling, like just I would say the manual and the mechanical one in the beginning, because the other ones, also that's kind of this elephant in the room about herbicides. So when you use herbicides, it's not like spraying directly into the I would say the plot or whatever we want to control. For example, one type of control is like cutting, or making like drills, definitely drills, and pretty much injection. yeah, the herbicide within the hole in the tree. So it needs to be already like a massive tree with a kind of considerable diameter. Um, so that helps a lot, but again, it won't have harm to the other species around. It depends, as I said, choosing the control methods, it depends of the characteristics we have, the type of species, and also I would say the invasive area. So it's like massive trees. We can't just hand pulling, right? So it depends. I would say maybe I don't know exactly one to know
Mhm.
that was the most not harming the native flora because in massive areas, invaded areas, there's no native flora already. So it's really hard. So I would say the first
Okay.
ones, the least invasive ones, invasive control, meaning like the hand pulling and the cuttings. So pretty much is the complementary of different methods and the continuity. So if we cut and we hand pull little, seedlings or little plantings, it's much easier. So it's hard. Maybe it's easy on our garden, on our little allotment to hand pull and cut repetitively. But then on massive invaded areas, you just need to think in a different way. You need to kind of change the shape and then apply other different type of control methods. Yes,
Yeah.
but the biological one is actually one of the best ones
Yeah.
if it's working well, if it's like well researched and well applied, I would say. We don't
Thank
want
you.
another invasive
Yeah.
problem,
Yeah.
invasive species.
Then I would like to ask if somebody else have another question. I should say thank you so much, Selena,
Cool.
and thank you to everyone for joining. It was a very
Yeah.
insightful and very interesting topic.
I just hope,
Very important
yeah, I
actually.
just hope like, create some kind of at least curiosity on people like going and having a look and maybe, having a different type of when they look observations when they look around and see
Yeah.
different species.
Yeah.
Um, can I just say I put
Yeah.
my email address at the end, but I do have a handout where I compiled like all the apps, the tools, and the platforms, so I can share also with you. And if you'd like them to spread it along the participants, or I'm more than happy to do it.
Oh
I'll
yeah.
send it after
Please
by
do it.
email.
Sure.
Sure, sure, sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much,
No,
Selena.
thank you for the invitation too.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for joining today. Have
Yeah,
a very good night.
you too. Thank you all.
Okay,
Have a
thank you.
good
See you
evening.
next
Bye.
time,
Thank you,
guys.
Kat.
Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you so
Thanks.
much.
Bye bye.
Bye.